Hey everybody, it's Robert Ohotto, and I'm back for episode 2 of Your Intuitive Edge. Thanks for all the feedback on episode 1. I loved it. I can't wait to get more after this episode. So, can you be blocked with your intuitive system? Is there a way to be unblocked with your intuitive system? How do you know your intuitive system is blocked? What are the 5 top blocks that I've noticed throughout my whole career when it comes to people and their intuition? That is what we're going to cover tonight and more. So welcome. This is episode 2, the 5 top blocks, and I think I'm going to add a few more in because I have a few more to add in. I'm going to add in a few more bonus blocks that we're going to work throughout tonight. So coming off of episode 1, where I just talked about what intuition is and how it works, we're going into a few more layers here. We're going to get going on how you can just be a little more clear, and I'm going to offer you some tips on when you're blocked and how to recognize when you are blocked from getting clear intuitive reads on something in your life or clear intuitive guidance. So I'm going to start with what I would consider to be for me, based on all the work I've done, the number one block I've seen with people. And that simply is what it is. And it's so simple, you're going to probably laugh. It's really that you don't want to know the answer. You don't want to know the answer your intuition's giving you. This is the number one block of all. And there's a lot that comes underneath this block. So I want you to think about something in your life right now that you've been struggling to get guidance on. Maybe you feel like I'm not getting the answer, I'm not getting something consistent, I'm not really sure what the answer is. And I want you to now take a step back and go, do I really want to know the answer? Is that something I actually want to know? If you can kind of get a sense for yourself that maybe you really don't want to know the answer. So let's say you've got a situation like you're dating somebody, or you're in a relationship and you're asking whether or not you should leave the relationship or whether you should continue dating somebody. And you really don't want to know the answer, although some part of your soul, some part of your heart is telling you it's time to know that answer. If you don't want to know the answer, this is your first block. So imagine I'm your intuition, and I'm just going to sort of speak a little angel to you tonight, as if I'm an angel whispering in your ear. I am your conscience. I am your clarity. And you've already, for some reason, decided you don't want the answer. Now we're going to go to tug of war. I think before I talk about what that tug of war can be and the side effects of that kind of tug of war, let's talk about why you don't want to know. Why wouldn't you want to know the answer to something in your life? Well, there's many reasons. That's why I'm picking this first, because to me this is the top number one reason why people don't hear their intuition clearly and get distorted or unclear intuitive guidance. You don't want to know. So why wouldn't you want to know? Well, you usually will have another agenda. You'll want an outcome that perhaps isn't realizable in the situation you're in, or isn't possible, or isn't destined. So let's say you are dating somebody and you want to know, is this the right person for me? Is this the person I should kind of keep giving my energy and my time to? And what you come to discover is that your intuition's going, hell no. And you go, but I want a yes. And now it's game over. There's nowhere else to go but to what I mentioned last week in the last episode. You have to go to the trickster. Your intuition's going to have to set up and go to the trickster side and guide you right into that 2x4 to get you to go, you know what? Okay, 2x4 is hurt. I think maybe I'm better served just allowing myself to know the answer here. So one of the reasons why you won't want to know is because you have an agenda that is not in alignment with your life path. Or maybe you have an agenda that is something you are grasping onto. You're attached to outcomes. And that begs the next question, well, why are we attached to outcomes? There's many reasons why. The thing that I could boil it down to is most of the time we are attached to outcomes because we have low esteem. Think about this. If you have outcomes that you want to see happen in your life, and you are attached to them. We can all have outcomes and we can have hopes and we can have wishes. That's all fine. There's nothing right or wrong about it. In fact, there's nothing right or wrong about having a low esteem driven agenda. It's all good. This is about understanding your intuitive system like a technician. So if you have low esteem, meaning I don't feel like I'm enough. I feel like I need to have this outcome to be enough. All of my value rests in this outcome coming to fruition, or this person being with me, or this marriage staying together, or fill in the blank. Now your intuition is going to have to negotiate that. Your angel voice is going to have to say, well, we're going to have to work through this intuitive low esteem system block with this person until they get enough esteem to hear the true voice. So if you've got some pause button, if you've got somewhere in your life where you already feel blocked and I'm already threading this out, and you've already realized, you know what? Yeah, the truth is, Robert's right. I don't want to know the answer, if I'm honest. Now ask the question, why don't I want to know the answer? So I just offered, yeah, you don't want to know the answer because you have another agenda. Well, now why do you have another agenda? You have another agenda because you're attached to an outcome. Why are you attached to an outcome? You're attached to an outcome because of your esteem. Now, I'm going to throw in something else that could also substitute in there with low esteem, and that's also, it could be a survival fear. So let's say it's a financial question and you have, let's say a financial question you're asking your own intuitive system, you want guidance on your finances in some way. Well, it makes sense that, you're going to have an agenda that the finances work out okay. And maybe the intuitive voice says they're not going to work out okay. And until you hear that, I can't guide you further. So sometimes it's not low esteem solely, or maybe it is a little something else. It can be a survival-driven fear. Something that says, look, I don't want to know the answer to that because if I'm going to get wiped out financially, I'm not so sure I'm ready for that clarity. But let's follow that through a little bit. And you can extrapolate from these examples anywhere that is fitting for your situations and fitting for your own life. But if you've got low esteem, or if you've got a survival fear that has recruited an agenda, and now you're reaching to heaven, reaching to your deeper self, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, your intuitive voice, your true north. But that true north is going to take you into some scary territory where you will be incredibly vulnerable. The vulnerability of low esteem is you could be humiliated, you could be rejected. The wound that has caused the low esteem in you could be retriggered all over again. Abandonment, rejection, all the things that we can all agree did not do so well for our esteem systems. Then throw on top of that, hey, I might not make next month's mortgage or rent if I don't get a yes on this financial question. But hang with me. This is just the nature of life. This is kind of a truth that I want to offer you that will help you stay in alignment with clear intuition, but also just get ahead of any kind of chaos that might hit you. You've got to know the true answer before you can make your next move. You will be stuck and oftentimes bring more havoc and more chaos into your life if you resist that true answer. So let's go back to finances. Let's say you're hoping, you've got a business, you got off the ground. It's not doing too well. It's been a good year to 2 years. You have not even broken even yet, and you're asking your intuitive system, and this can be anywhere in your life, just substitute your own situation. But you're asking your intuitive system, hey, is this business going to make me some money next year? Am I going to finally at least get to even? Maybe to the black? And your intuitive system goes, actually not at all. And the reason why I am saying not at all is because this isn't the path for you. You chose this business because you thought it would get you to enough, but it expresses none of your talents, none of your gifts, none of your self-connection is here. So the truth is, you've got to bottom out financially. This is not your mountain to climb. This is not your dream. I can't tell you how many clients I've created a profile from that I'm basically communicating to you right now. I've read them. I even had a client once say, I became a lawyer to prove to my father that I could be one because he thought women couldn't be lawyers or be smart. True story. And she hated being a lawyer. So when she came to me, we worked this out. I said, look, you've got to drop it. You've got to drop it. I'm sorry to have to say you went through law school. You did all these things. You were driven in this certain way. The whole while your inner voice was overridden by your father wound to such a degree that you couldn't hear it tell you, you have no desire to be a lawyer. This isn't in your passion. This isn't in your fiber. It's not an archetype you have. So, similarly, sometimes you've got to, if that woman would have never ever been willing to hear, being a lawyer is not your gig. If she would have never been willing to listen to that, she would have been in a jam for the rest of her life, a loop, a stuckness. Her potential would have never gone beyond this, I'm pleasing my father, ha ha ha. That was what she had defined her potential as. I proved my father wrong was how she defined her potential. So take a step back from everything I just said. We're talking about intuitive blocks. Are you trying to pursue something in your life, do something, make a decision that is, if you got really real and deep and honest with yourself, you are chasing someone else's dream, trying to be enough in the eyes of others. You are pursuing something that simply really isn't even in your inner creative pantheon of the parts that make you you. You don't have the lawyer archetype, the actor archetype, the writer archetype. You don't have these forces, these creative forces in you. They don't exist. You think you need to have them. They should be there so you can finally be enough. Now, back to your intuitive system. If it's trying to get through to you, this is where we get agendas. And it's saying, listen, I'm trying to tell you that you were meant for another path. But you are so pressured and your esteem is so gutted that you can't stand in yourself and go, I'm willing to hear that. I'm willing to hear that now. Where in your life right now are you willing to hear that voice? That voice. So this first block that you don't want to hear, and I'll add into that, it's not only like you don't want to listen to the guidance, you deny it. You deny the guidance. These usually go together. There's a denial and an unwillingness to hear it. If you even get into my ear a little, I'm going to deny you were ever even there. So when it comes to survival fears, I think this really matters a lot as well. Because a lot of times, and this is true for me, there's times when there's an answer coming that you just don't want to hear. What if it was a health diagnosis? And you didn't, that's a great example. How vulnerable is that? Where there's something going on in your health, and the intuitive truth is that maybe you have a very serious illness or a chronic illness, or you're living in a way that's creating chronic problems for you. Do you want to hear that? Can you just say, hey, game on, heaven, I'm in. What you got? Now, under the umbrella of this, that and the attachment of outcome that comes with it, I want to also reiterate that I've seen this is where we trigger the trickster side of the intuition. So if you don't want to hear it, you continue to deny it, whatever that intuitive clarity is, it's trying to get through to you. Then the trickster goes, okay, game on. I'm going to have to trick you into the truth. And that is, as we all know, a very, very painful journey, and it can last a long time. So my advice to you on this first intuitive block: examine your life, examine yourself, look around, and just get a sense of, where am I willing to hear something? Where am I not willing to hear something? And folks, I always want to impress this upon you. We live in a shame-based culture where I think, take our perfectionism even to shows like this tonight. Your perfectionist might be translating everything I'm saying. So let me arrest that immediately and always reference this in any episode I do. I really believe and know in my heart that there's nothing right or wrong. There's nothing right to get right or wrong here. I really, as an intuitive, I think what it gave me is one of the greatest gifts was learning how to see myself and other people as a technician. So there aren't good or bad people to me, per se. I think there's lots of people in pain that act out of their pain and do crazy stuff, and we've all done that. But I think if we looked at this technically, and once again, the more compassion we bring to our blocks, the better we're going to allow ourselves to hear what's really clear and true. So if you're going to sit there and go, well, I don't want to hear that, it's going to make me wrong. Well, now you've set yourself up for the trickster, and you're going to be negotiating that for quite some time. But if you said, I think I'm willing to hear this, I just maybe need a little more time for it, and I'm going to give myself unconditional compassion, presence, and love in the meantime, your intuition's going to go, hey, pick up the phone, I'm calling you right now. Want to talk? And you won't have that distorting the line. You're like, yeah, okay. I know. And so what do you do with low esteem? Obviously, there's a lot more there that I would have to do in another episode about how to work with low esteem. But for now, I would just say, you got to accept it. You got to accept, first things first, you have to accept you're blocked. If you stay in resistance and try to tell yourself you're not blocked because you're perfectionist, or you feel like you'll be a bad person, or you're just really crappy at hearing your own inner voice, you're going to stay blocked. Be willing to be with what is. Step one, always acceptance, acceptance, acceptance. And it doesn't mean you have to like it. Who likes their low esteem? It's not one of your best friends in the sense, in terms of a nourishing experience and feeling, it makes me feel so connected to myself. It does the exact opposite. It makes us chase outside of ourselves trying to get back to enough. So first things first, though, always just go, look, I'm blocked. I am blocked. And every other block I go through here, the first thing I would have you acknowledge is that you're blocked. So if you're confused, if you've been getting mixed signals or mixed guidance, let me just say right now, you're blocked. You might be in a tug of war with the trickster. Come to that balance and pull back. Stop trying to read it and get curious about the block. You will never get a clear read in a blocked signal. So stop it. So I've watched a lot of people when they are in blocks with their intuitive system, and I've done this too. I'm smarter now. They will go to their next intuitive tool to try to figure out the answer, or go to a psychic, or go to an astrologer, or and they keep running around like crazy trying to get an answer when the answer is you are blocked right now. The first thing to do is unblock yourself. How do you do that? You do it the same way I just threaded this first block out. And that's just a really quick swipe. There's many more threads we could go through on block number 1. But we got to move on to block number 2. So what is the second, I'd say, top block of intuition? And this one, once again, to me, it's so obvious we miss it. Your life and your psyche and you are too sped up. You are running too fast. So you're on your social media, you're watching your news feeds, you're rushing to this, you're rushing to that. Intuition tends to find you when you finally put your system in slow-mo. So one of the ways to unblock your intuitive system is slow the frack down. Take a break, meditate, slow your system down. Just like when we watch slow-mo replay on sports, right? You see so much more that's going on in that slow motion. Your intuitive system and your perceptual system overall is the same way. So slow down. And as I go through these top, 5, maybe 7 blocks that we're going to cover tonight, I want you to think, okay, Robert's starting from the top. First, admit you might be denying that you want to hear something. Admit that you're rejecting hearing something, or that you don't want to hear something. Start there. Next, slow down. Slow down. It's that simple. And it's so obvious, but I can't tell you, and I know this in myself, when I go into intuitive reading states, it's a very interesting state of consciousness for me. It's slow, it's focused, and yet the impressions are lightning fast. Both are true. But I oftentimes can't get them as clearly if I'm sped up. And sped up, I mean, it's your mind. I can go on a run, be in a meditative state, and get lots of intuitive guidance on a run. It happens all the time. It's how I come up with courses to teach. However, that's different the being sped up and racing in your mental field and distracted and all over the place. So pull yourself back. And if you're, so, all right, I'm blocked. First things first, I need to slow down. Let's go on to block number 3. So block number 3, this one's kind of fun for me. And I think we've all suffered from this. There's been so many, I think, fantasy versions of what intuition is put forward through Hollywood movies, but also not only that, let me just keep it real, through other intuitives and psychics that try to make it something that I personally have not experienced it to be. So a lot of times what you will do is you'll be blocked in your own intuition because you'll expect it to be this flashy vision that drops down from heaven, or an apparition that appears and starts speaking to you, or suddenly, you go into this massive altered state and talk to other beings. Those things are real. They can happen, but they are so incredibly rare. In my own life, they have very rarely ever happened to me. So intuition is sometimes so obvious you miss it. It's speaking to you all the time through an astute interpretation of your synchronicities. It's speaking to you through feelings, hunches, that gut feeling. It's sometimes recruiting your 5 sensory perceptual field and senses. Sometimes it's just this sort of thought that comes into your head and you're like, that I didn't generate that. That's from something else. Once again, you got to be slowed down to hear that. You got to be in a place of neutrality. You got to be in a place of perception, not projection, to hear that. So that leads me to, so basically, block number, I think we're on number 3 coming up here. No, number 4. Number 4 is projection versus perception. I'm going to get there. I'm going to bridge from both of these here. But let me just wrap this up. Drop the Hollywood stories. Come to know, seriously, how your intuition speaks to you. And don't expect it to be flashy to be accurate. Most of the time, it's not flashy at all. It's operating in such a normal way, you miss it. Because you have been fed these stories that it should be visions and only certain people are privileged to them. And no, I'll tell you something I know to be an absolute truth. Everyone on this planet, now, while not everyone's wired like me, everyone is wired for their own guidance. You are absolutely wired for your own guidance. Someone like me is helpful when you can't seem to hear your own guidance, or you need someone like me who can see in different spectrums than perhaps you can perceive. But you are absolutely, per birthright, given your own channel. And that's what this whole TV show is about. It's about how can you get that channel for yourself to work? How can you, and know what it's like when it's working. It's smooth, baby. It's dialed in. It's not flashy. It might be once in a while, but that's the times when it's just a little bit, little extra juju in the room or something. So most of the time, it's really balanced. It's really smooth. It just comes in, it talks, you feel it, you get guided. And I'm going to leave you with something there too. First thought, best thought. The first impression you get is the most accurate one, I'd say 98% of the time. Now that's an impression, that's a perception, not a projection. So how many times, think about this when you've met people. How many times have you met people and then you had this first impression of them? That's actually an intuitive reading. If it's not a projection, that's an intuitive reading. And then somehow you pushed out that data and you decided, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm being too judgmental. Now, there's a difference between perception and judgment. Judgment is when you cover your own crap on someone, your own bias, your own good and evil paradigms, whatever it is. Perception just goes, you know what? That person's a narcissist. I knew it when they walked in the room. I could tell, I feel it. That person is has real issues with rage and is actually a very violent person. I just get that vibe. Or sometimes, you just don't like someone and you don't even know why. There's no logical reason. That's a reading. Listen. Don't override your own clarity just because you're supposed to be a nice person. You can still be nice, but stay clear too. You can know someone is, a ticking time bomb of rage and engage them with courtesy and politeness and civility, but I'm not so sure I'm going to be inviting them to dinner. And you cannot invite them to dinner. So both can be true. You can be clear about people and not judge them. Someone might have rage because they were abused as a kid. Someone might have rage because they're in a really rough, chaotic cycle of life and they're in a divorce and things are melting down. You don't know what's going on with people in that deeper way, but you get a sense of peeps. You get a sense of them. Listen to that first impression. Now, drop your fantasy intuition. Let's go on to projection as the next block. So projection is when you take your idea, when you constellate in yourself, and you put it onto someone as if it's the truth about them. You're no longer in intuitive perception. One of the things I think that is so teachable here in our current crazy times is how this happens politically. People will take political tribalism and instead of perceive a candidate and the merits of their candidacy and of their, I think, worthiness of being a candidate, instead of perceiving that, they will, from a tribal political party, project whatever they want onto that person, just because they happen to be a Democrat or Republican, or whatever else your parties might be worldwide. I know a lot of you watch me everywhere. Check in with that. This is a very good time to practice this projection versus perception. Are you really perceiving somebody or are you projecting? And how do you know the difference? One of the things I can offer, I think, quickly is that a lot of times projection carries with it a whole entire story. It's like a novel goes with it onto that person. You have a whole novel about them. And here's the truth about people. It's the truth about us. We're all much more complex than any one projection. And we all have a past, we all have a history, we're all going to make mistakes. How many times I've seen this happen, and I certainly have been guilty of this, how many times have you projected onto somebody that maybe you've known for quite some time? You've projected onto them the person they were 5 years ago, or the person you've known them to be up until maybe a year ago. And you haven't seen them for a while, but you just assume they're the same person. That's not an intuitive read. That's a projection. You are taking their history, your experience of them, and your historical experience of them, and projecting it onto them in the present. How many people have done that to you? When you've done all this, caterpillar to butterfly in the meantime, and the map they had of you is no longer relevant. This is just a great way for me to start to get you into clear reads on yourself, on people. Watch your projection versus perception. And oftentimes projection will have not only a novel, a whole story, but it also has a lot of emotional charge to it a lot of the time. So you put on these really maybe dark feelings or light feelings. You can project, onto somebody, these qualities that are not really perceptible in them, but you've put on them and they're shiny. We don't always project dark stuff. The next block that I'd like to look at is when you have unresolved psychological issues that become part of your projections, but also part of your perceptions. I talked about this in episode 1 a little bit, where one of the things that will block you from clear intuitive reads is unfinished shadow work or unfinished psychological integration of things like trauma, prejudices, biases, things that you haven't really taken in and kind of examined with compassion and love and brought a sense of okayness to. Those things become filters of perception in our psyche. So if you've got unresolved issues, it's like, I'll tell you a story. A lot of you have followed me, know this story, but it's where I really saw it happen in real time, and it was a really phenomenal thing to witness. I have a beautiful black lab, and I was walking him in South Dakota once in this beautiful canyon, And I had just finished teaching an intensive weekend there. And there were a group of 3 women approaching us around this corner, and he was off leash. We were out in nature hiking on these beautiful trails. And my lab is the most loving animal. And if he thinks you're upset, he comes in and tries to comfort you. And we turned around this corner, and one of the 3 women saw my dog and immediately went kind of like this, and like got real tight and started screaming. And at first I honestly thought she was kidding, until I saw tears coming down her eyes. And then I realized that intuitively to me, it was like I watched her morph in front of my eyes into a 5-year-old girl that had a dog attack her. And she was not seeing. This is my point. She was not seeing because of that trauma not having been resolved. She wasn't even seeing with her eyes, not only her intuitive eyes, but just her eyes. The loving black lab in front of her. And of course, my dog, seeing her in duress, wants to move in and comfort her more. And then, of course, that freaks her out more. It was a phenomenal moment, of a teachable moment for me, to watch her time warp, perceptive in this perception that there was not a loving black lab in front of her. There was a vicious dog ready to kill her. And it was not true. It was absolutely not true. Now let's flip that to unresolved things in your psyche and your intuitive clarity. You will not see intuitive things clearly, or clearly intuitively, when you have unresolved trauma. And once again, this is not to make anyone right or wrong. We all have these things in our perceptual challenges when it comes to intuition and being clear. We all do. What I want to offer is just name it. Even if for tonight you just name, look, I can't see that person clearly or this situation clearly because it triggers trauma in me. I won't get a clear read. Can you be that clear with yourself? I will not get a clear read on that. That charges me up. And no matter what the read may be, I have history there. I've got historical context and stuff I have yet to neutralize. We never get rid of our history, folks. It's a truth in your brain neurology. It's a truth in your psychic system. This whole idea that we get rid of things is BS. What we do is we neutralize things. And we create new ways of seeing, perceiving, processing information. So know your vulnerabilities when it comes to the unfinished business psychologically that you have in your own psyche that blocks you from seeing clearly. Do an inventory. You got homework, baby. I ain't playing. This is how you get to an intuitive edge. You start to go, look, I know where I can be clear and where I can't. And where I can't, I've got to leave it up to the gods. Jesus has got to take the wheel. Or I have another person that's not carrying the same filter and distortions. I'll have to have them read this for me. And that's actually when someone like me comes in very handy. You've got areas of your life that you cannot see for yourself because there is too much going on. There's too much fear. There's too much junk in the trunk from your history. And you have someone like me come in and go, hey, look, I don't have any of that. I am absolutely neutral. I will be your surrogate intuition in this area of your life. And I'll tell you, I've said this in many interviews. That's exactly what I feel a lot of times. My role is to my clients. I am the surrogate intuition that, for whatever reason, they cannot see clearly in certain situations in their own lives. And that even happens to me. I'll consult other people on my behalf for, let's say, second opinions. So that's a big deal. And it feeds into projection. That woman projected onto my dog something he wasn't at all. So all this interrelates. Now, the next block to intuition I want to offer you is when you are only seeing intuitively in what I call 2D. Either or. If you have trained your mind, and this is something the culture's done to all of us, by the way, train your mind to think in either or. Our language often reflects this. Our religious traditions, a lot of us that grew up in religious traditions reflects this. There's good and evil. There's right or wrong. There's happy, unhappy. There's greedy, there's generous. There's judgmental, and then there's forgiving. I could go down the line. There's hot, there's cold. There's sweet, there's sour. There's spicy, there's bland. Now, if you sort of see in that sort of, I would say, black or white paradigm, your intuition can only function in 2D. And intuition itself, by its nature, is holographic. It perceives spectrums beyond just 2 dimensions. It goes into 3 dimensions, it goes into 4 dimensions, it goes into 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dimensions. It goes into the dimensions, certainly when it comes to your own antenna, that you need to see per your own destiny and the fulfillment of that beautiful, sacred soul contract you made to have this journey of expressing all that you are to life on this planet. Your intuition is your true north. And whenever you find yourself, now how do you unblock all this? You unblock the 2D perspective. Once again, politics is a great place to look at this too. It's Democrat versus Republican in my country. And I'm a registered independent, and I love being that because I don't have to get locked into that crap. I would never collapse my psyche into that. And I recommend you don't. You know what it gives me? It gives me a chance to read things as they really actually are. So let me give you, so I could be, let's say, this isn't true of me, but I could be a quote unquote liberal and see in a liberal candidate a bunch of bull crap. Both can be true. Both can be true. You can see truths in people, and they're both and. That person is really, really generous and amazing, would do anything for an animal, but man, when it comes to human beings, I can't believe how judgmental they are. Both are true. There was a dog that needed rescuing and brought to a home. That person would drive across 3 states to do that, but would never welcome someone homeless into their own home. In fact, would spit on them. I'm actually talking about people I know. So both are true in people. Both are true. We have many different truths in us that coexist simultaneously. They are not 2D. We're a whole hot mess, baby. We're flawsome. And the more that you can be with that, you pull yourself out of that either or paradigm of perception, and you see a lot more. And what does that give you? That gives you more information. What does that give you? That empowers you with conscious choice. In 2D perspectives, intuitively, or in projection versus perception, you are not in conscious choice, you are in compulsive choice. There was no way that woman who freaked out when she saw my dog had any choice other than the compulsive reactions that I saw her go through. There's nothing we could do but get my dog away from her. That was it. Her system had not and was not going to shift like that. So similarly, you will be blocked because simply your thinking, the way you have been conditioned to perceive is not inclusive of other spectrums of paradoxical truths. That people can be, one of the things that I think really comes to mind is John McCain, who just recently passed, who was, both stubborn and yet would work with other people from the Democratic Party. Both were true about him. Opinionated, yet also could admit when he was wrong. So if you can't approach yourself the way you see yourself, the way you see others, beyond just either or, you're going to be shorted a lot of clear reads on people. And it's interesting because I've watched people, especially when it comes to dating, or just even friends, they think, I've seen people think this way, well, if that person's not vegan, I can't hang out with them. I just cannot be around people that don't understand how horrible it is to kill animals. Instead of, maybe, I don't agree with that part of how they, relate to animals, but they are still a compassionate person and they care about people, and maybe I'll hang out with them and, share some of my insights and my philosophy, and maybe it'll change them, maybe it won't. But either way, at the end of the day, it's about acceptance and connection, and I'm going to just plug into the USB ports where I can with these people. If you let your connections with others be what they're meant to be, what they can be in their potential, you'll be nourished by them. Instead of trying to make everyone fit into some either or, you're either with me or against me, or you believe exactly as I do, or you're out of my life kind of paradigm. I have many family members that have very different beliefs about my sexuality, but we all still love each other. Both can be true. And I can see them very clearly, intuitively. I can see how fundamentalist religion has collapsed their vision and their heart. And yet, somehow with me, that heart stays open. I see that too. So I know that potential is there, but I'm not, casting them out. I'm clear about, how they perceive and think and feel about certain things, but it's all good. So I want you to think about situations in your life where everything I say applies. Where are you blocked? Where do these blocks speak to you? Where are they pinging you? Where do you go, wow, you know what? I think I do a lot of projection. I think I've got unresolved things in my psyche that keep me from seeing things clearly. The best move always is just be curious. Just be curious. Be willing to see. Be willing to admit to yourself also when and where you're blocked. That's the first step. So if I have situations in my life, and this does happen to me, where I just cannot get a clear read, I kind of just get curious about that. I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? Why am I not getting information? And here's another thing I want to offer to you. God, I wish I would have had myself teaching me like 20 years ago. It sounds so egotistical, but it really would have saved me a lot of suffering. I had to learn this the hard way. This is a huge key I'm going to give you. Sometimes, folks, you can't read something you're not meant to know. You are not meant to know. Maybe ever, maybe maybe not right now. Do you know when you hit that space? Are you that sensitive to your intuitive system that you can go, you know what? I'm getting a blank here. I'm not going to get an answer. My guidance team is not reporting in on this. I'm not meant to know that. Just because you get clear intuitive, let's say, signals running through your psyche and your antennas up, and you do integrate shadow work stuff in your psyche, and you do all the things I'm asking you to do, does not mean you are entitled to information or a clear read. Sometimes the reading is, you're not meant to know. Come back in a month, or you're just not ever meant to know that. So stop asking us. No, take the next step. Do you know what it feels like to get that answer from heaven, from your guidance team, from your own intuitive system? You know what? You're not meant to know that answer right now. This kind of does cycle back to what I talked about in episode 1 around process guidance. Sometimes your guidance isn't about a revelation or a yes or no answer or a, readout that's concrete. It's about a process. It's about, no, you can't know that yet. Just keep walking. We'll let you know when it's time. Trust us. We know how to dial you up. And that brings me to another block. Do you believe that heaven can't reach you? What, you think God's going to go gossip and tell someone else your clarity? The gods can find you. The angels know where you are. Stop running around, scuttering and grasping to catch their wings. They can show up just like that. Live that way from now on. That'll be one of the best ways to unblock your intuitive system. Look, I'm constantly guided. Guidance is this fast. If it's on offer, I can get an answer. I'm in a state of perception to see it clearly. Boom, done. So I want you to feel through these elements. And also, sometimes you do need someone to give you a reading. And reach out when those times come. You can't know when you cannot read something. Know when you can't do it. Know when you're not meant to read it, and also know when you just can't. I'm curious to know, do you guys know the difference here? between these pieces, these elements in yourself. Start exploring them. That's why I'm doing this episode, is so that you will take on all these elements, start exploring them in yourself, and see what can happen next in your lives. So I'm going to sort of close this down, and I just wanted to mention, starting in September, we are going to continue with these episodes. They will not be in Wednesday nights because I have something special that I'm doing instead that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But if you want to participate in upcoming shows where you can actually speak to me on camera and ask questions, I'm going to be offering those in September, and the best way to do that is make sure you are on my newsletter on my website, ohotto.com. We are letting people know all the time when the show is broadcast. I'll be releasing my September schedule through that, and you'll always be in the know of when to tune in and also how to actually speak to me. And the best way to do that is through a system that we're broadcasting through called Crowdcast. So there's going to be more information through my newsletter on how to reach out, talk to me. Now, I love your comments. I love your feedback. I don't have time to answer all of them, but I do read them all, whether that's Facebook, whether that's my YouTube channel, whether that's Crowdcast, and also whether that's on my website. So please leave me your comments and your thoughts. And oftentimes your questions, if you ask me a question, I may not be able to answer because I don't have that much time. But they do give me ideas for other shows, and there will be eventually just a straight up Q&A live intuitive reading show coming at you in September. So I hope you guys will be there for that. So what I wanted to leave you with here just for a bit is I wanted to let you know what I am up to coming up in this next through September into October. I've got a really cool thing I think you're going to definitely want to check out. So I am going to let you take a look at that right now, and I will come back and then we'll close it down, and I will be seeing you guys very, 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 very soon. All right, here you go. Check this out. Hey there, it's Robert Ohotto. As part of our human journey, we are each scheduled to experience numerous challenging cycles of chaos. I call these cycles of chaos and challenge. Make no mistake, you are always either entering into one of these cycles, in the midst of one of these cycles, or on the way out of one of these cycles. And it's not right or wrong. It's just part of what is necessary in terms of the creative renewal of your destiny. This summer, I spent some time with Carolyn Mace, and we were discussing cycles of chaos and challenge because clearly they're present everywhere right now in the world. And I began to explain to her how I had mapped out these cycles through my work over the past 20 years, both with clients and myself, and had come up with a sort of strategy on how to work with these so that they aren't as dark, they don't last as long, that you get consciously engaged with them and understand the intentionality of a chaos cycle. And so I was explaining all of this to her. She literally stopped the car we were driving and said, look, you've got to do this for another Reflections Parallel on mace.com. Please, 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 will you? And of course, I said yes. So here we are. So I'm here today to tell you a little bit about this brand new course I'm launching through Reflections Parallel on mace.com called Igniting Miracles in the Dark, an archetypal guide through cycles of chaos and challenge. So cycles of chaos and challenge can be greater than you. As I just mentioned, sometimes it's about the cycles that are sort of moving through the culture or the world or your country or your nation or your city or your family. A lot of times you can be going through a recalibration, disorganization and reorganization around something more nourishing and more soulful in any area of your life. And sometimes there's just a greater karma than you at play. There's that element of cycles of chaos and challenge. Additionally, these cycles are unavoidable, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, as the Greeks have said, from chaos comes all things new. And that's very true in terms of your destiny, in terms of the creative renewal of your life, and you moving into the next expression of your own potential. So that said, is there a way to work with chaos cycles such that the dark night isn't as dark and maybe it doesn't last as long? Is there a way that you can maybe co-creatively engage these cycles to bring an empowered sense of order to that chaos that they bring? Well, of course, the answer is yes. And that is why I'm doing this course, is to teach you exactly that. How can you meet cycles of chaos and challenge in your life archetypally through the guide I will be teaching you over 6 weeks in such a way that you know the archetypal crew you're going to need for every area of your life where a chaos cycle hits. So if you have a chaos cycle hit you in the relationship sector of your life or in the financial sector of your life, both of those sectors might need different archetypes activated in you to handle and reorder that chaos, and also open in you new empowerment that then leads to a whole new dimension of your own potential. The second thing I'd ask is, well, are these cycles predictable? Do they have a timing? Yes, they do. I will teach you that as well in this course. I'm going to show you that not only do they have a timing, you can work with that timing in a certain way to where you can kind of mitigate how long and drawn out a chaos cycle can last. And the last thing I'd like to add is that I've also, certainly in recent years, realized that you can do something called igniting a miracle in a dark chaos cycle. I love this. You can get to a tipping point of conscious choice and become what I call an X factor of grace in these cycles. If you have the right archetypal coordinates, the right tools, the right orientation to the cycle, a deep understanding of what it is in your own sacred contract it's activating, you can create this tipping point that ignites a miracle. I hope you will join me over the course of the next 6 weeks, starting on September 5th, every Wednesday from then on until October 10th. This course will take place during that time for about 90 minutes each session, and the sessions will start at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll be meeting week to week, and I will be going through lesson to lesson with you on how to break down and understand the cycles of chaos and challenge in your life. And I will be giving you a model that you can use for the rest of your life, no matter what area of your life is being hit by a cycle of chaos and challenge. So I just want to give you an overview, lesson to lesson, of what I'll be covering. In lesson 1, starting on September 5th, we'll be looking at the 6 stages of a chaos cycle. Additionally, in this lesson, we'll look at the anatomy of a miracle. We're going to look at chaos as mystical law and a divine reordering of your life. Essentially, in this lesson, I'm going to introduce you to how to map chaos cycles and what they actually are, and recognizing the timing of them in your life. Then we're going to move on to lesson 2 the next week, where we'll look at chaos cycles of identity and ego. So what happens when chaos hits your own sense of identity? The person you think you are. How do you deal with that? What kind of archetypal crew do you need to activate in yourself to transform during this kind of a dark night? How does fate become free will here? How do you also ignite an identity and ego miracle? I know that sounds very weird, but hang with me. Come to the course and you'll see what I mean. Then we move on to lesson 3. And in this lesson, we're going to look at chaos cycles of relationships and family. How do you deal with chaos cycles that hit your family? How do you deal with chaos cycles that hit your relationships? What kind of archetypal crew will you need in that regard? What is the dark night of love and relating? How do you move through that with conscious co-creative awareness? We're going to look at your optimal position of power in that kind of a cycle. We're going to look at what happens when you have to really basically destroy the maps others have drawn of you in terms of what you mean to them as a necessity to move into more potential for yourself and express your gifts and your creativity to the world and reignite your destiny creatively in a new way. We're going to look at how do you ignite relationship and family miracles. It's going to be so good. So then we move on into lesson 4. And in this lesson, we're going to look at chaos cycles that hit health and money. The chaos cycles of health and money. So we're going to look at the financial dark night. What does that mean? What's its purpose? What is the soul of money? We're going to look at health chaos and the body of your life. So the health isn't just about your physical body, it is, but it's also about the body of your life. What do you do when a chaos cycle hits that and disorganizes you and puts you into a state of chaos? What kind of archetypal crew are you going to need for that? We're going to look at the psychic DNA of a health crisis. There's a whole history of family behind that. We're going to explore from the psychic DNA level. And then we're going to look at, of course, how to ignite a financial and health miracle in your life. How do you ignite those miracles in your life? Then we move on to lesson 5. And this is chaos cycles of career and spiritual calling. So I'm sure you have had at junctures in your life a sense of feeling lost in terms of your purpose to the world. What are you here for? Whether you would identify that as career or spiritual calling, or I like this idea of a calling hyphen career. We're going to look at what happens when chaos hits that part of your life. How do you work with that? What archetypal crew do you need to work with that kind of a cycle of transformation? And we'll look at the difference between spirituality and mysticism, because we're looking at spirituality here. We're looking at what happens when chaos hits your spirituality and how that reorganizes your gods, whatever your concepts of the divine are, whatever your philosophical ideas of life are, or the beliefs that you've held. What happens when chaos hits your life in a way that those beliefs cannot metabolize or compute or make sense of? We're going to look at that. And then we move on to the final lesson, which is chaos cycles of mysticism and the chaos cycles of the world. So we end here, I think, in the most powerful place to examine the dark nights that, part one, are not personal to you, but yet you're part of. How do you work with that? How do you identify the chaos cycles that are larger than you? How do you know they're not personal to you? How do you know that they're larger than your own personal psychic field? And how do you work with that? What archetypal crew's got to come online for that? How do you understand then from there the holographic connectedness of your life and work with that truth within chaos cycles that are larger than you? Also, we're going to look at the necessity of holographic psychic hygiene that allows you to be in the world but not of it, and hold a new center and position of power within chaos, hurricane, and cycles that swirl about you, affecting many areas of your life, yet the karma may be bigger than your own. How do you work with that? How does a mystical chaos reorganize your gods? What's the difference between chaos hitting your spirituality versus chaos hitting your mysticism? Very different. So we're also going to look at, finally, what it means to ignite a miracle and become an X factor of grace to the world. This course is going to be so incredibly life-changing. It's something you'll be able to take with you for the rest of your life. Anytime a cycle of chaos and challenge hits you, you will know exactly how to find your archetypal true north, recruit and activate the archetypes in you and outside of you to get you through, and you'll just know exactly how to get through it. And it will, I promise, mitigate how long the dark night lasts. You'll work with it as a co-creator. You'll move out of any victim consciousness around what's hitting your system, what's hitting whatever area of your life. It's just going to be absolutely life-changing. And I am so grateful to Carolyn Mace for inviting me back to mace.com to teach my second reflection series. I hope you'll join me. I look forward to helping you change your life. I'll see you then. See you soon, starting on September 5th, lasting until October 10th. To learn more, simply click the link below or around this video and just go right to mace.com, look at the description, see if it's right for you, and get yourself signed up. I'll see you September 5th live in class. Namaste.